Hello and welcome to another episode of Talking Politics here at The Hindu with me, Nistula Hebbar, where we unpack the news making the headlines in domestic politics. This week, and the week before that actually, was all about the internal organizational changes within the BJP. BJP President JP Nadda made bold changes, not just in reconstituting the Parliamentary Board of the party, that is the highest decision making authority in the party organization, but also the Central Election Committee of the party that goes into candidate selection, and several general secretaries of organization were also moved around from different states. Now, the political implications of these changes is complex, with each inclusion and exclusion having implications for the future plans of the party within the BJP, shoring up support in specific areas and specific states, but also for equations between leaders, all that chatpata internal fights within the party organization. Let's put it this way: the changes on the whole are like an onion with several layers to be unpeeled to reach the real essence of why these particular changes were made. Even before Wednesday's move to reconstitute the parliamentary board of the BJP, there was, the week before that, a significant move to reassign general secretaries of organization of various state units, which also tells an important story. Let's begin with that, then we'll move on to what happened in the parliamentary board reconstitution. In the BJP RSS structure, first of all, the General Secretary organization is the most important link between the leadership of the party and the party organization, as well as being the key link between the BJP and the RSS. The BJP is the political or frontal organization of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. And this link goes down all the way to the party workers. So basically, it's the General Secretary organization is the most important man, actually organizationally speaking, in the party structure. If the party president or the chief minister of a particular state, who is a BJP leader, is the face of the party going into the election, the General Secretary organization, always loaned from the RSS to the BJP, never an outsider from the RSS structure, is the quintessential backroom person, turning the levers of the structure of the party to pull together. In the week preceding the reconstitution of the Parliamentary Board and the Central Election Committee, General Secretaries of organization of various state units were moved around. The most significant being the transfer of Sunil Bansal from Uttar Pradesh to the national team as General Secretary in charge of the states of West Bengal, Telangana and Odisha, all three states where the BJP wants to push ahead. It has some success in West Bengal, Telangana and Odisha, and the party sees its future growth in those areas. Now, Mr. Bansal, who is closely associated with Union Minister Amit Shah, when the latter was General Secretary in charge of UP, this is in the run-up to the 2014 elections, and later when he was BJP President. And this was the team that got spectacular results for the BJP in India's most politically significant state. So much so that his equations with current Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath were not exactly cozy. Ever since Yogi Adityanath's re-election as Chief Minister, there was talk that Sunil Bansal would be moved out. The price of that extraction was Yogi Adityanath appointing his Deputy Chief Minister Keshav Prasad Maurya, again not exactly a close friend, as the chief of the BJP's legislative party in the Legislative Council. This quid pro quo, it was hoped, had left honor satisfied on both sides and would buy some peace between Delhi and Lucknow. Similarly, Arun Kumar, who had for decades been in Karnataka as the General Secretary organization and was known to be a close associate of current General Secretary organization at the national level, B.L. Santosh, was moved out, and Rajesh GV, one of the youngest to occupy that position, was brought in his place. Now, Arun Kumar was said to have difficult equations with former Chief Minister B.S. Yediyurappa, and was basically caught in the crosshairs of the rivalry between Yediyurappa and Mr. V.L. Santosh, and even with his successor Basavaraj Bommai. He was in fact considered, again I said, close to National General Secretary Organization V.L. Santosh. Similarly, in Telangana, Mantri Srinivasulu was moved out to Punjab as his own run-ins with the state BJP president Bandi Sanjay Kumar were making things difficult. These were portents of the massive organizational changes that JP Nadda effected in the party with the blessings of Prime Minister Narendra Modi and close consultation of Home Minister Amit Shah. So, what are the implications of the changes in the Parliamentary Board? The Parliamentary Board has 11 members, and as a matter of form, ex-presidents of the party are accommodated, and according to the party constitution, the General Secretary Organization is also part of the board. It is presided over by the party president. In the current form, Mr. B.L. Santosh, as I said, as part of the party constitution, is part of the Parliamentary Board. Mr. J.P. Nadda is the chairman of that board. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Mr. Amit Shah and Mr. Rajnath Singh are all part of the new Parliamentary Board, the newly reconstituted Parliamentary Board. Now, the exclusion of Nitin Gadkari as a former party president is therefore a big move, and it kind of seeks to say a lot of things in that exclusion. Mr. Gadkari is a minister and is a popular one at that in the Modi government and is considered close to the RSS. And in fact, as an MP from Nagpur, the national headquarters of the RSS, he has been known to be proximate to the RSS's leadership. In Maharashtra politics, Mr. Gadkari is identified with the naysayers of Mr. Devendra Fadnavis, another Nagpur man, and he's currently the Deputy Chief Minister of the state. Lately, Mr. Gadkari, never one to mince words, has been quoted as being too frank about the workings of the government, not very complimentary either. And basically, all of this would have not amounted to him being dropped from the Parliamentary Board, except that in the slow exit of leaders of the pre-Modi Shah regime, it was Mr. Gadkari's turn. In the 8 years of the Modi government and its unquestioned electoral dominance, the national leadership felt secure enough about the RSS, not objecting to the leadership taking this step. The only remnant of that old BJP, of the pre-Modi Shah BJP, currently in the Parliamentary Board, is Defence Minister Rajnath Singh. That's not a very comfortable feeling for him either. Now, the other big exclusion has been that of Madhya Pradesh Chief Minister Shivraj Singh Chauhan, who was the only Chief Minister in the Parliamentary Board. Now, Mr. Chauhan is a contemporary of Prime Minister Modi. They were both Chief Ministers. They both kind of ran contemporary tenures, Mr. Chauhan in Madhya Pradesh and Mr. Modi in Gujarat. But basically, he was never a favorite with the current dispensation running the party. But he was accommodated earlier to balance equations. Now, let me explain why that happened. After the party's loss in Madhya Pradesh in 2018, he was beginning to be sidelined. The party high command had appointed Vishnu Dutt Sharma, who's a Khajuraho MP, as the party president, state president. He was of the younger lot. Narottam Mishra was getting a lot of prominence in the state unit, etc. But the sudden move by current Civil Aviation Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia, his move to the BJP meant that Mr. Chauhan was seen as the only BJP leader who could be Chief Minister in the midst of the COVID pandemic and with the prospect of 28 assembly by-polls, which had to be fought across the state as a result of Mr. Scindia's revolt. Now, there were a lot of MLAs who had moved with Mr. Scindia to the BJP. They all resigned their seats in the Madhya Pradesh Assembly. There were other by-polls also to be held. All of it clubbed together was 28 seats across Madhya Pradesh. The BJP had no other leader who had a pan-Madhya Pradesh presence, and Mr. Shivraj Chauhan therefore got another kind of stroke at the job. But while the bypolls went the BJP's way, Mr. Chauhan could never quite find his mojo in his latest turn as CM because the world, the ecosystem around him had changed. In a situation where the BJP was on the hard Hindutva route, he tried to move on from being just Mama, the maternal uncle, a very avuncular sort of presence in Madhya Pradesh, not given to a lot of hard Hindutva rhetoric, to the bulldozer mama, aping Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath's signature move of basically bulldozing properties of those accused of crimes, etc. It did not work for Mr. Chauhan. In fact, the BJP lost crucial seats in the local body polls held recently, and on Wednesday, the party leadership demonstrated that he needed to find his political joy again if he is to be restored to clout and glory within the system. Uh, the big inclusion in all of this was that of Mr. Yediyurappa, the man with the multiple comebacks, the comeback kid of Karnataka politics, who only months before had been asked to quit as chief minister. He commands the support of the powerful Lingayat community, and he has remained an important bloc for the BJP in the state. It's not, Mr. Yediyurappa is not a shrinking violet. He did not go quietly into that sunset. He basically got together all the powerful leaders of these powerful Lingayat mutts in the state to say that they supported Yediyurappa and his leadership, and only agreed to validate Basavaraj Bommai's chief ministership because Mr. Yediyurappa also gave way to him. And Mr. Yediyurappa also did not basically ask the BJP High Command before he announced that in the next assembly elections, his son would be B.Y. Vijayendra will be fighting from his assembly seat. Now, all of this was Mr. Yediyurappa kind of exerting his clout. It didn't help that current Chief Minister Basavaraj Bommai was unable to handle controversies arising out of the killing of the Bharatiya Janata Yuva Morcha members, especially by Islamic fundamentalist groups apparently, and the party's youngsters turning against the BJP, as we discussed in previous episodes of the Talking Politics. There were a lot of problems, internal problems that have come up for the BJP after the murder of youngsters in the party like Prashant Nettaru in Mangaluru, near Mangaluru, and basically the charge that the youngsters put against Mr. Basavaraj Bommai's government, that his government was poor on law and order and could not protect young people affiliated with the BJP in that state. Now, the national leadership knew that Mr. Yediyurappa needed to be mollified and brought back into the tent before the 2023 assembly polls, because there seems to be, despite of course the fight between Mr. D.K. Shivkumar and former Chief Minister Siddaramaiah and the Congress, a kind of an upsurge for Congress support in that state. Now, with Arun Kumar, General Secretary Organization, Arun Kumar's exit as General Secretary Organization, and with the inclusion in the Parliamentary Board, Yediyurappa seems to have been mollified. He said that, he was really conscious of the honor that had been done to him by the party leadership by including him in this most powerful body within the party organization. His victory was, of course, an additional joy for this old war horse would be that he would be in the committee with his bete noir in state politics, B.L. Santosh. It couldn't have turned out better for him. Many other inclusions reflect a conscious effort by the BJP towards diversity in the highest decision-making body of the party. Now we have Sarbananda Sonowal, former Assam Chief Minister. He's a Kachari from Assam, a tribal group. It's a significant tribal group in the state. Now, after he was not repeated as Chief Minister, even though the assembly elections in the state had been fought on his government's record, there was a feeling that despite his rehabilitation as Minister in the Union Cabinet, there was a feeling of resentment that a tribal Chief Minister had been so summarily dismissed. Therefore, this was a signal to Assam, to tribal communities there, that no, Mr. Sonowal was pretty much on the mind of the national leadership of the party, and they wanted to keep him close. Sudha Yadav, she's an ex-MP from Haryana, and her husband had passed away during the Kargil war. Her inclusion, party sources said, signals promotion to women and respect for families of servicemen, people serving in the Indian Armed Forces and ex-servicemen. K. Lakshman, chief of the OBC Morcha and Rajya Sabha MP, is from Telangana, a state where the BJP feels it has a future. While Satyanarayan Jatiya belongs to the Dalit community, always a very, very important community that BJP wants to reach out to. Now, the boldness of these moves shows that the BJP's top leadership is confident and comfortable to make changes, even that some of them may not be palatable to the RSS, and that while a united front is being presented and an overall leadership of Prime Minister Modi is accepted by all, there is seething resentment and choppy equations underneath the surface. The appointments to the Parliamentary Board and the Central Election Committee raised the curtain and gave us a glimpse of all of this in a snapshot. Always a very, very happy thing for journalists to cover. I hope this episode, a rather long one, was all that you hoped for in terms of clarity. Thank you for watching. I will see you next week.